Hello everybody, welcome to the Geneva Impact Talk, the Circular Economy Challenge. My name is Renate Günther and I have the pleasure to be one of the co-founders of the Geneva Macro Labs, and I will be moderating this Impact Talk today together with my colleague Marianne, who will be directing the Q&A session. Most of you know the Geneva Macro Labs already. We are a do tank that brings leading minds together from the public, private and civic sector in order to support sustainable development. And with our impact talks, we are supposed to inform impact standards and influence the sustainability debate in order not to reinvent the impact wheel over and over again. Some technical hints before we start. As a frequent webinar participant, you might be aware that it's important to mute yourself in order to avoid background noise. Also, this webinar will be recorded, so please feel free to switch off your camera if you don't want to be seen in the video. And feel free to comment and post your questions in the chat. Only the questions that are posted in the chat can be addressed during the Q&A session. Before we start, kindly let us know where you're located. We always want to understand how international our audience is. What's on the agenda tonight? We will talk about circular economy as a possible catalyst for our climate goals. Then we will look at main challenges for the circular economy. And we will also see how we can embrace regeneration in our business models. And every block of questions will be followed by a Q&A session where you as an audience have the possibility to ask your questions. Again, we will pick the questions that we will see in the chat, and then we will ask you to unmute and speak out. I'm delighted to welcome our distinguished speakers today. We have some breaking news, unfortunately. It's the first time ever one of our speakers just phoned us, and he had an emergency and he is very sorry not to be able to join in person. However, we will be producing a video with him afterwards so that you can later review the whole event on our YouTube channel. I'm delighted to welcome our speaker Natalia Dziergwa, who is here today with us. Natalia works for the Circular Economy team at the World Economic Forum and focuses on its flagship initiative, Scale 3060 Degrees. In 2019, she undertook a research project that was funded by the Horizon 2020 European Commission program. In that context, she developed an innovative framework of interplay between circular economy and its technical enablers, such as Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and data. And prior to joining the forum, Natalia spent a long part of her career at IBM across strategy, digital transformation, artificial intelligence, and innovation consulting. Natalia holds an MBA from the University of Cambridge, where she has been awarded a prestigious Forte Foundation Fellowship. The speaker whom we can't welcome in person tonight, Jonathan Normand, is an expert in social innovation and governance. Before moving to the sustainability field, Jonathan spent more than 12 years in international financial institutions. One of them was Reuters, now part of the London Stock Exchange Group, where we were colleagues, however, never met, unfortunately. In 2014, Jonathan participated in the launch of VLab in Europe, which is responsible for rolling out the B Corp movement. He founded and has been leading VLab Switzerland since 2017. That's a non-profit organization promoting social environmental impact measurement tools, as well as a B Corp certification. And Jonathan is also the designer of the Swiss Triple Impact Engagement program. Welcome to our speakers. You will be presenting and talking about a new era today where capital is used to also address sustainability challenges. And we see a new economic and social culture emerging to allow for sustainable action. And for more than a decade now, the international community is working towards sustainable growth away from our throwaway economy. Where do we stand and what does it take to enable a circular economy where waste is eliminated, resources are circulated, and nature is regenerated. Over to my dear colleague Marianne and to our distinguished speaker.
Thank you, Renate, and hello, everyone. Very pleased to be moderating now this interactive part of our session today. As Renate has mentioned, we have this first of the time event that the second speaker is not able to join us. However, we, as a Think and Do Tank, we love to be flexible, and we decided that we will do after this webinar, after this impact talk, a recording with Jonathan, so that you will be able to hear from him his main points that he wanted to share with you today. What we're going to do is to look into the three questions, main questions that Renate has showed on the agenda. And in doing so, I would love to now open the floor to the first part that we'll be looking at. You all know that currently we are seeing COP26 happening, the climate conference in Glasgow. It's now the second week. And in light of the discussions there, we can observe that the topic circular economy is becoming more important. The circular economy has become, I would say, part of key national and international policies, for instance, the European Green Deal. Yet, and that's really not encouraging, only less than 10% of the global economic activity is circular. Now, as the world leaders are now gathering in Glasgow, we can see there is this increasing recognition that the transition to circular economies or a circular economy is vital to climate change. And that's actually the first theme we would like to focus with you on. The circular economy aims in general to allow for sustainable production, for sustainable consumption and resources by using or by minimizing pollution, turning waste products into productive assets, and so on. Now, Natalia, thank you for being with us today. Renate has already talked about your background, you work at the World Economic Forum, and we would love to hear from your experience in light of COP26. How can the concept of a circular economy accelerate actions to meet our climate goals?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, it's such a pleasure to be here. So glad to see so many people interested in circular economy innovation, and also obviously how circular economy relates to our climate goals. So starting off with that first question, I think for quite some time now, it has been recognized that actually the renewable energy transition can only address a percentage of the total global greenhouse gas emissions. So I believe that Ellen MacArthur Foundation has actually estimated it at around 55%. And the real question is, how do we actually tackle the remaining 45%, which is crucial for the transition towards and achieving our climate target goals. And those remaining 45% actually, it's divided between pretty much industry and agriculture. So industry is the second largest source of emissions, following the power industry, and actually accounts for 27% of total emissions worldwide. And it's really the circular economy that is the key here for addressing those emissions. It is estimated that by using circular measures, it's actually 40% of the total emissions from industries such as cement, steel, plastic, that can be reduced by 2050 in order to meet our climate target goals. And circular economy for a long time has been that missing puzzle really in how we can tap into those remaining percentages, those remaining emissions that we really do need to meet our target goals. And for that matter, actually at the forum, we've got several initiatives that are targeting those numbers. And first of all, we've got the circular economy for net zero industry transition with multiple action tracks at the moment focusing on built environment and transportation, with more to come in the next year, focusing also on building in the finance and innovation domains across the different action tracks.
Wow, thank you, Natalia. That's already a great overview. I would love to understand to what extent does your work reflect the biggest needs in the energy sector? Do you feel that the projects that are being reviewed by your colleagues, by you, are well addressing those challenges?
Yes, absolutely. So we're constantly iterating our project. So as I've mentioned, at the moment, we do have those two action tracks following the built environment as well as transportation industries, looking at obviously reducing those emissions through the use of circularity measures. But we are reiterating those to also focus on other aspects of the industry to continue addressing as large, as big of a proportion, as big of a percentage of those emissions as possible.
Okay, thank you so much. My next question, or the point I would love to look into with you, is something that comes natural to me to ask. I'm taking care of stakeholder engagement at our Think and Do tank, and this is all about looking into collaboration. When we now look into the role of public-private partnerships, what role do they actually play in enabling circular economy innovation to tackle the hard-to-meet climate goals?
Yes, absolutely. So I believe that transition cannot really be accomplished by an individual actor on their own. The whole transition can only be accomplished through actually setting up partnerships, alliances, and allowing for systemic change to happen. The mission-driven businesses only become really powerful once they have formed those alliances, tapping into opportunities across the different industries, as well as utilizing the public and private collaboration. So in terms of the industry alliances, what I mean, for instance, is what we notice is that, waste in one industry might actually be a very valuable resource for another one. So it's looking at those industry symbiosis opportunities that really allows those mission-driven businesses to really flourish and really embrace circularity measures. As for public and private partnerships in specific, I think the example that continues coming back in all of our action tracks is working with the regulators and the standards institutions specifically. It is because, as with many of the circular business models, it's actually waste at the end of the day that is being used in production of new goods. And as such, those regulations and standards needs to be adjusted, and they need to guide the innovation in terms of, including that waste in the production processes. So one example I can give for sure is from our built environment action track, where we're looking at the use of green cement. So green cement actually uses the demolition products from previous construction sites as an ingredient for that new cement to be used in building of the new buildings. And at the moment, the building norms do specify how, what's the percentage of the total mass of the cement that can be the said demolition waste. And it is very important for those innovators in that space developing the green cement and to looking to utilize it in building to work alongside the standards institutions as well as the regulators to continue updating those building norms to really follow the innovation and allow us to really use as much of it as possible. So I would say for sure, and that's probably one of the key partnerships that just needs part of the process, part of the innovation process.
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting example, and I can see that that's exactly reflecting what has been shared in the chat, the question on the role of public-private partnerships. So thank you for already alluding to that. I can already see there's some question coming in, and I'm handing over to Renate because she has an eye on the content.
Thank you, Marianne. So I have a question from Roberto Bonino. Roberto, do you want to ask your question and unmute the microphone?
Sure. Pleasure. Thank you. My question is, imagine I'm your average SME and I would like to move towards circular economy. Where do I start? Who do I call?
Yeah, sure. So that's actually, I think, part of what we have asked for. The second question, which was around the challenges to circular economy innovation. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and start describing one of the initiatives that I'm actually very closely collaborating with, which is the Skill 360 Circular Innovation Program that we've got. So as part of it, it's basically a global movement where we're working with our partners to enable systemic change to really move towards more circular ecosystems rather than looking at individual companies embracing circularity. And in many cases, I think, you know, that's where your question might be coming from. Those ecosystems are very well optimized, but unfortunately for linear economy rather than circular one. And as such, that change needs to happen at an ecosystem level to really allow for those SMEs to embrace circularity and really scale. That being said, with those challenges in existence, it doesn't mean that there aren't any that are embracing it despite those challenges. So as part of this talk today, I really wanted to draw your attention to our Uplink platform, which is the forum's platform for collaboration on sustainable development goals. On that platform, we run numerous challenges addressing all of the different SDGs. And one of the cohorts I'm collaborating with quite closely are the circulars. And the circulars are the startups that are circular first, really. So their entire business model is really built around circular economy. And I think, you know, there are so many different examples from the previous cohort and also soon to be launched the next cohort coming soon in 2022 of how those startups really have not only embraced circularity, but actually created their entire business model around it. And I think one example, which one should I give? There's 17 of them. So I think the one that I really like referring to is actually a company called Sticks Fresh. So, you know, those little stickers you find sometimes on the fruit you buy in a supermarket. In the past, I used to find it simply annoying because there was something stuck to my fruit, had to get rid of it. But actually, they produce stickers that prolong the life of those fruits and vegetables. Yeah, it's just an amazing thing that, you know, technology enabled, allowed them to really embrace prolonging the life of the resources that we've got, in this case, fruits and vegetables.
Thank you, Natalia. I have another question from Iman from Cairo. Iman, would you like to ask a question, please?
Yeah, I have a question concerning the enablers. What are the enablers for circular economy, especially in developing countries? Thank you.
Okay, sure. So as for enablers, I think I will just continue referring back to our Skill 360 initiative. So for that one, we have identified several of them. So first of all, obviously, we are looking at investments. So there is more and more investment becoming every day when it comes to investment in circular economy. It's actually one of the points that has been mentioned during our COP26 session yesterday, that VCs no longer see investment in circular economy as philanthropic activity. It's something that is necessary. So investment, I would say first and foremost. But then there is many other things. So for instance, I would definitely call out use of technology and data. So this actually refers back again to the project I have participated in 2019, where the technology really is seen as an enabler for a circular economy. So many of the business models would not be possible without the IoT, the AI, and so on. So it's the access to that technology and the continuous development of it. Also the use of data for sure. So the data infrastructure, the digital solutions that are really helping us enable it. Another aspect I would call out is the change drivers. So when it comes to those ecosystems I have mentioned before, at the moment, yes, they are optimized for the linear economy, sadly, but there are a number of things that we can do to drive that whole systemic change and allow for companies to really embrace the circular business models. So yeah, those are the ones that I would for sure mention as enablers.
Thank you, Natalia. Before we move back to the next presentation point, we have 3 minutes for another question. I want to give the floor to Eckhard.
Yeah. Thanks, Renate, and thank you, Natalia, for this great first set of introductory remarks. I wanted to kind of follow up a bit on what Iman was saying, about, her focus specifically on developing countries, because you talked a lot about technology. But I mean, I think that the question is really also how do we bring in maybe less privileged communities? And I'm thinking especially about one example in Sierra Leone, in Freetown. The mayor of Freetown, Yvonne Akisaya, had actually developed a new kind of institutional framework to help kind of the poorer parts of her town to bring into this whole management of this whole waste management. So kind of really involving them in this idea of kind of bringing these people into the circular economy, and hence solving both the sustainability and the social issue to a certain degree. I mean, it's obviously not fully solved, but I mean, I was just wondering to what extent that's also part of the focus that you have, that you not only look into technology side, but also in the kind of how we can actually use these new approaches to say sustainability to also address social issues that we have in our societies.
Yes, absolutely. So I think I definitely see a circular economy also as means of achieving a more equitable and just societies across the world. So I really wish I have better prepared in terms of one of the recent talks that we actually hosted. There was a speaker who talked really about circular economy and how it impacts on the societies in Africa. I'm happy to share the link later because I think the points mentioned there far better than the answer I can give you right now. But it really it really showed how much more sort of impact on those societies those solutions might have, but also how much more involvement from those societies they actually activate. Because those people do really see those solutions as a game changer really for their societies. And there was, I will not make up this number for you, but there was a ROI number that was quoted that really showed the difference when it comes to those circular projects and other projects currently being funded in that region. So I'm happy to share the link. I will not dare to quote that number right now because I would just be making it up. But also to add to my response at the moment, it's coming back to Skill 360. I've seen that Renate has shared the map of our program. And if you open it up and basically click on any of those green dots, it should open a slide which will show you what we're doing in those particular geographies in a little bit more detail. And the one dot that I would encourage you to click in terms of that is actually our program in Indonesia in collaboration with the Global Plastic Action Partnership. So when it comes to our Indonesia program, what has happened is we've hosted a challenge again on Uplink that was a call for solutions for informal waste pickers in the region. Again, it was part, obviously, we're looking at circular business model where we're collecting plastic, we're looking at how to recycle it and so on. But we're not just looking at the process itself or the technology behind it, but we are looking at how we're including the society that is really behind it and the society that is really enabling us to embrace that circular business model, because without them it would really not be possible. So it was all about improving their livelihoods and improving the conditions of work for those informal waste pickers.
Thank you, Natalia. I think you made a great point of some of the key topics we are looking into at Geneva Macrolabs. You mentioned basically some key points on why ESG considerations, environmental, social, and governance considerations, and as well using the SDGs as a North Star, as a framework, is important when we talk about circular economy. We cannot only look at it from a profit point of view, but from a social benefit and nature perspective. So I think that was a really important point that you made. And the questions I could already see popping up now in the chat are well referring to the next block of questions that we would like to look at with you. Just one final comment on the circular economy, the concept. We had a really great discussion I found with Jonathan from B Labs, who will share his view in a recording after this impact talk. And he was making the point that linear economy by definition becomes unsustainable in the long term. And what you are doing at the World Economic Forum provides some best practices how to work against this way of doing unsustainable business. So where do we see the main challenges for circular economy innovation? I would like to look with you on the at the role of innovation. I think we all agree that innovation can drive a circular economy transition, and also best practices are there to replace the linear economy approaches. But a few days ago, the UNECE invited member states, NGOs, and national organizations, and many more to explore the challenges just at the beginning of this week. And it's relatively safe to say what I saw there is there's kind of a consensus that simply promoting innovation is not enough. And in order to support the circular economy, innovation needs to be pursued with circular economy objectives. And that's, I think, the trick, the difficult part. Where do you see, Natalia, based on your experience with Cambridge University, your study there, but also your work now at the World Economic Forum, the main challenges?
Sure. So I think at the risk of sounding like a broken record here, I'll refer back to our Skill 360 initiative, where we're working with our impact partners worldwide to really enable systemic change for circular economy innovation. And what we have learned through our collaboration with our impact partners. So at the moment, if you take a look at that map, we've got 9 national programs and 14 city hubs working with us. What we do is we do have the central design thinking methodology, really, that allows you to identify challenges and also that provides you guidance on how to address them in form of 26 interventions included. And this is something that has been developed through an iterative process, and we continue adding to it as well, as because through our collaboration with those impact partners locally, we have really noticed that those challenges, you cannot really speak at the global level that those are 3 key challenges for circular economy innovation. They're very different when it comes to different geographies and different ecosystems. So all of those impact partners that we're working with. We're very much relying on their local know-how and their local connections to really empathize with their own ecosystems and really zero in on what is the key challenge for each of them that they really need to address, and that would unlock the most value for improving the conditions for the circular economy innovation. And part of our methodology is, as I said, design thinking. So there's several activities that we recommend for sort of challenge identification, scoping, prioritization, but it is up to our impact partners worldwide to really select which challenge is the most pressing one when it comes to their geography. I can give you a few examples of what those challenges might be based on our work with those impact partners. So I'll definitely call out one that continues repeating is probably the lack of capabilities. So it's the lack of maybe not awareness, because obviously circular economy is a more popular topic now than it was in the past, even just by judging the number of people on this call. But it's more about the actual knowledge on the implementation of those circular business models and the competence, and also the circular mindset. So just embracing it in the first place, rather than just following through with what is actually easier, being the linear economy. Another one I would mention as well is sometimes potentially the lack of economic viability. Obviously, some business models might be more economically viable than some of the others, even those circular ones. But with some of them, unfortunately, there is still quite a big prohibitive upfront investment cost. So that might be another one that really puts off some organizations from really investing and embracing circularity. And I think the last one that I would mention is probably challenges around the feasibility as well. So I've already mentioned collaborating with the regulators. So, you know, anything to do with building norms, any other industry standards, anything like that as well. So sometimes I think, you know, you can think of a great idea that, you know, is technically feasible, but is it really going to be feasible when you take into consideration all of those different aspects, not just the technology behind it, but actually what is allowed and what is not allowed, and you know, how much effort would that be to really convince a set regulator, for instance, to change those norms. And again, here my recommendation here, I guess, would be the strength is in numbers. So fostering those alliances and partnerships really makes a huge difference, because when it comes to working with those regulators, when it's a whole industry that is seeking, you know, a change in regulation, it makes a very big difference in comparison to just one company going on its own.
Thank you, Natalia. I will now move on directly to the questions that we can see in the chat, because they reflect well what you just described. I'm handing over to Renate.
Thank you, Natalia and Marianne. And I would like to give the floor to Jim. Would you like to unmute, please, and ask a question?
Okay, thanks, Renate. Hey, my question is really, you know, linear economy is the term being used, but I'm thinking more about how do you incentivize economies that are really more wasteful oriented, consumer oriented, you know, haven't had a bite of the sustainability apple or even an interest in doing that. How do you do that when so much of what we're talking about is really more out of the goodness, the right thing to do? And so I think everybody who's on this call understands what I mean about goodness and the right thing to do. How do you incentivize those that aren't similarly minded? Thank you.
Sure. So I really wish Jonathan was on this call right now, just because I think, Marianne, you have mentioned that one of the points he has covered off in our preparatory call really was that at the end of the day, linear economy is actually not sustainable. And I think, you know, this is the point that really can address this question, because at the end of the day, the resources that we've got on our planet are limited. And yes, at the moment, perhaps they are still sufficient to continue with some of the linear business models that we do have in place, but it's not going to continue forever. And with the technological enablement developments that are currently happening, actually the circular business models are becoming more and more viable. So those upfront investment costs I have mentioned, they're becoming less prohibitive due to the technology advancements, for instance. And as such, that investment might not be as scary as it would have been a few years back. Also, as I've already mentioned as well, is with the VCs seeing it as more of something that needs to be done rather than a philanthropic activity. So there is more funding now nowadays also available than there was in the past. But really what I think really can act as that incentive for businesses to really embrace circularity is several cases and examples, plenty of them online, where you can really see the return on investment. So at the end of the day, circular economy is not just one of old practices used as oh yeah, for our CSR we're going to do this and that. This is actually a business opportunity as well in many cases. So I think one example, again, feeling like a broken record a little bit, but I continue coming back to build environment and with them, for instance, I think the one of the largest costs for the industry is actually the cost of waste. So as you can imagine, the way that buildings used to be built, once you have built something up and you realize the day later that actually that wall needs to be moved by 1 meter to the right or to the left, all of the materials used completely wasted. But by embracing circularity, and in this case, actually we're looking at redesign of the products. So one of the key business models for circularity is looking at modularity and how you can actually take something apart and continue reusing the resources used. For the built environment and construction industry, it really makes a huge difference when it comes to cutting waste. And at the end of the day, waste is a lost cost. So yeah, there is business case behind it as well. Perhaps not every single circular business model, but for a number of them, there are numbers available online already today that really can be used to really incentivize those businesses to invest and to start their journey of the transition.
Mm-hmm. That was very interesting, Natalia. I hope, Jim, that you feel your question has been answered. As Natalia said, Jonathan intended to actually speak about that. He is leading the B Lab movement in Switzerland, which is this certification around sustainability for the private sector. And he was making the point in our prep conversations that the power of consumer expectation really comes back to the question of convenience. So as long as you as long as consumers don't understand that circularity does not mean necessarily inconvenience, you have a different ecosystem evolving, right? So I would add to Natalia's point that it's a matter of highlighting the right incentives to the different stakeholder groups. One publication that I'm not sure, Natalia, if you've mentioned it, is the study that at the end came out of your research at Cambridge 2 years ago, where you and your colleagues, you were looking into the interplay of Internet of Things, of automatization, and energy consumption, all in the realm of circular economy models. And what was striking to me was to understand that, in fact, by the argument of eliminating business management deficiencies, you can get those who were criticizing at the beginning, you can get them convinced that a circular economy model at the end will be driving their business stronger, better than saying with a linear economy approach. That is something I can invite our audience to look into study. We can share the link later on so that you can find out about business models that are discussed in that study.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, last question before we move to the third round of presentation. We have a second Natalia in the call. Would you please unmute and ask your question? You had several, just choose one, burning one.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for this webinar. It's very interesting. And as always, there is always, the scalability question. So out of two questions, actually, I can make one. Because what I didn't hear, maybe I missed it, then I'm sorry, but about the government regulations in circular economy transition. What is your opinion? What is, in your opinion, is lacking to advance the implementation of circular technologies in private sector from the government regulations perspective? Is there something you did maybe research on, or what would be your comment? Thank you.
Okay, so for that one, I would say, so the point I was making around it was definitely the regulation keeping up with the rate of innovation. So in many cases, what we do see is obviously the circular business models evolving, the technological advancements allowing for more business models being embraced and also being embraced better, faster, and so on. And in many cases, like in the case of built environment, that regulation is just really not keeping up to speed with what can be already technologically feasible. So I use the example when it comes to built environment, but another one that I can think of really is also potentially collaborating really closely with ministries all over the world, the ministries of health. Simply because, again, when it comes to circularity, we're talking about potentially using resources regarded as waste in production of the new goods. And I can see many regulations being prohibitive when it comes to allowing those production processes to really take place and use waste as one of the resources, one of the ingredients in whatever those new goods produced might be. So I think it's also the question not only working with regulators around built environment, and then also looking at a very close collaboration with the healthcare industry and really those ministries taking care of those regulations.
Thank you so much.
Renate, you had a look at the chat. Is there another question?
No, please, over to you, Marianne. We will address the next questions if we can in the third round. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you in the meantime to all of you who are actively providing some questions into the chat, and please continue. We still have 17 minutes left to discuss. And in this last part of our conversation today, we would love to look with you into the future, into opportunities. The question that I would have for you, Natalia, I would love to talk about is around regeneration, which is really linked to the question of how can we pave the way for a circular economy. So how can we move towards regeneration within our business models, and how can technology help in that endeavor?
Sure, absolutely. So I think I would like to start off with actually not entirely related to my current work, but an article I have recently read in the Harvard Business Review, which really talked about those regenerative circular business models and how each organization should really select them, because not every circular or regenerative business model is going to work for every company. Obviously, those should be selected with caution. And what the article really talked about was, I think, quite a fresh perspective, because when I've read it, obviously I've read a lot about circular economy in the past, but this one I felt really addressed some of the potential concerns that companies might have. And it talked about selecting a business model really in line with the company's strategy, resources and capabilities. And it mentioned using a circularity matrix when it comes to the access as well as the process when it comes to those resources used. So first of all, the access, so whether those resources used for a particular business model are available. If they are available, how difficult it is to get to them, collect them. And the other aspect of the matrix is the process and how hard it might be. So whether it's something relatively easy to recover, or is it something that's going to take significant effort and investment to really get out from said waste. I'm happy to share that link. I just was looking at that article earlier today as well, so I can post it in the chat in a second. But I think it really helps frame things and really allow companies to very cautiously and knowledgeably select the right business models that are going to work for them. But when it comes to the technology, that's, I think, what I wanted to focus on more in my response as well, is the innovators, the circular first companies I have referred to before as well. So many of the innovators that we're working with have really started off with their business model being centered around circular economy rather than adapting it to it. So for those, I would say I would definitely recommend checking out the app platform and taking a look at the current cohort, the cohort coming soon next year, in terms of what business models do they use and how they are making it work for them, not only from the solution working, but also how they're making profits, earning revenues, and how it really works for them. The one session, I think I've shared a link with you, Renate, before. I'm not sure whether you have posted it to the chat yet, is the talk that actually happened yesterday around driving the ecopreneur revolution as part of our Forum COP26 live program, which really talked about how those ecopreneurs are utilizing technological advancements to really develop business models and center themselves around them that would not have been possible in the past. And for that, I can also refer to that research project we have already mentioned. It had a lot to do with obviously utilizing those different technologies as enablers, but then also looking at some technologies that might be perceived as inhibitors for circular economy. And for that matter, I think one would be security. So with many business models, I think the problem with security would be, the use of sensors. How many points of risk threats and risks do they introduce to the entire system? And as such, improving the security of the solutions and really focusing on that might also enable some additional business models that would not have been possible otherwise. So yes, enabler technology can be an enabler, but also can be an inhibitor, and it just needs to be addressed. Sorry, I feel like I got a little bit lost in my response over here, so I'll give it back to you, Marianne, to maybe ask some follow-up questions.
Yeah, thank you, Natalia. No, I think it was good to hear your thoughts about what role technology plays, and I believe that this is of interest to our community. I would love to kind of combine the comments that we have in the chat, and we do have some comments about the challenge to combine the social components of embracing the circular economy, and also about at the end of the day, how can we actually use how can actually circular and ecopreneurs scale the solutions? It's one thing to start the business model in a way that it reflects a circular economy approach, but then how to live up to the standards, to the high standards from the beginning, and how to follow such an agenda in the long term.
Yes, absolutely. So when it comes to scaling those solutions, what we have noticed through our collaboration through the Uplink platform really is, in some cases, it's the ecopreneurs coming together and finding out that, for instance, you know, one of them has got a solution to a problem that another one has been struggling with for quite some time. So I would definitely point to collaboration and setting up those partnerships we have covered up before. Again, not sure whether the link has been already posted, but we do host the circular innovation community on Uplink. And that's where really those innovators collaborating with us can share, you know, any issues that they might have come across with the others and seek their guidance and advice. So I think it's, you know, coming together, the open innovation, sharing the ideas, and really collaborating more closely together is one of the points. Another one is actually, again, I wish I shared the link before, but I might just get it posted in chat in a second, is the Circular Trailblazers report we have published earlier this year. So when we speak about the circular trailblazers, we're talking about scale-ups, so slightly more grown up, more established startups in the circularity space. That are really not only growing their own solutions or scaling them, but what they're also looking at doing is actually developing whole new markets for those solutions that they do provide. So it's an interesting model where not only, you know, you're working on your own solution, but you're also developing a whole market that maybe existed but wasn't that big before, or maybe didn't exist at all, and building that demand for your own solution. So another method of really scaling your own solution. And then I think what we also do as part of our efforts here at WEF is the amplification. So obviously a lot of the innovators that we're working with are quite early to growth stage entrepreneurs. And through our platforms, you know, our social media, the events that we're hosting, what we really try to do is to amplify their efforts and really raise the awareness and provide them with a platform for more visibility. So I think it's also seeking those opportunities to make yourself known, not only in your local ecosystem, but worldwide. Because in some cases, you know, your solution might be just something that somebody on the other side of the world is really looking for and is willing to help you scale your business for that solution to work for them.
Thank you. And time is running short. We are very pleased about your numerous questions, and I would like to give the floor for last time to Michele and Professor Ashutosh, and maybe you can ask your questions first, Michele, then Professor Ashutosh, and then Natalia, would you then please provide your answer?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and congratulations for a very interesting talk. My question straightforward is the following. Any innovation have actually at least two main aspects, technology and the social, human. In terms of technology, we already discussed a bit about security, about digitalization, so on and so forth. So about social, have you any experience, or what is your experience in exploring any cultural barrier to circular economy? Thank you.
Okay, well, the first one that just
Natalia, can we first take Professor Ashutosh, and then you would go ahead with your answer? Would that be okay for you?
Absolutely, sorry.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Natalia, I just wanted to know how much is effectivity of the circular business models been measured across any city, any state at level, even a municipality level, because you cannot prove something unless you measure it in a real world.
Okay, sure. Okay, so first we've got a question around the cultural barriers, and then the second question is around the measurement of the real effectiveness of the circular business models. So I'll start off with the cultural barriers, because I think that one just, you know, one answer just popped into my head straight away, which is probably simply the perception perception of it. So in many cases, you know, when I start telling people that I work in circular economy, and even upon explaining a little bit about it, people still see it as, oh, so we're just talking about recycling. Obviously, circular economy is so much more, and we all know it on this call that it's so much more than that. But in many cases, I think it's just so that perception that what we're talking about at the end of the day is just recycling. And another aspect of it as well that I would call out is probably the fact that when we're talking about circular economy, and some of the business models is actually using waste as part of the production processes. So in this case, I think in some cultures, and you know, also I've mentioned the regulations around it already as well, as you know, it might be the perception is like, why would I purchase a good that has been created out of waste if I can have one that has been made of fresh, nicely fresh resources, right? So I'm not sure how many people would share that opinion, but I think that's something that people would consider as well, and would probably consider it with some of the goods more than with the others, because, you know, some that are, I don't know, closer to us in terms of, you know, from the health perspective or anything like that might be a little bit more relevant for those than for some of the others. But yeah, that's just something that popped into my head when you asked the question. And then when it comes to the measurement, so the second question around measuring the effectiveness of circular business models. So yes, there has been a lot of research around it done. There has been some reports actually released not that long ago around the whole measurement methodology behind it, and this is something that we're actually quite actively working towards on my team as well. Simply because measuring circularity, it's not as straightforward as with some of the other solutions, some of the other business models. Obviously, there is the circularity gap report produced annually. There is also the circularity metrics report that has been recently published as well. Again, I'm happy to share the link later, but that measurement methodology has not been really as well established as in some other cases. And again, one of the situations where I would be really happy for Jonathan to be on the call, because he was going to cover off the impact measurement really when it comes to circular economy. So Marianne, I'm not sure whether you've got any comments from him that you can use to address this question.
Not now, but what we agreed with Jonathan just before we started Impact Talk today is that we'll take some of the questions today that have been asked to him, and we'll have him commenting, so we can transmit those questions to him and have him giving his insight on that. But basically, the idea about B Lab Switzerland is really to help for looking at the right measures when it comes to understanding the impact that a business model has on society, on nature, and on the market, and also using the experience of understanding those measures as a learning experience. And that's the whole purpose of going through such a certification process, to ask uncomfortable questions and to understand how the particular ecosystem of a specific business is evolving, and how as well different market forces will enable or disrupt a circular economy approach. But we're more than happy to have a chat with Jonathan to have him commenting a bit more. But thank you, Natalia. I think you have done a great job. It was meant to be interactive, and we managed well. I think you have given us a good insight in the different initiatives that you are leading at the World Economic Forum, and we are happy to share the links with our community also when we are sharing the recording of this Impact Talk. Our time is almost over. I thank everyone for being with us, but before we really close and I hand over to Renate for the famous last words, Natalia, if you now have 30 seconds for a final statement, what would you like our audience to take home of our discussion today?
Absolutely. So I would say that in many of the examples I have given, I have underlined the importance of really the systemic change, the building the partnerships, alliances, and working together towards circular economy. I personally do not believe that transition towards circularity is possible without working together. And I would say that what we have managed to perhaps destroy working apart, we can work together to fix. And I wish this was my quote, but I'm just paraphrasing the words of Sir David Attenborough from the COP26 speech he has given a few days ago. So I'll close at that. Partnerships, alliances, working together for circularity.
Thank you, Natalia.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everybody, Natalia, Marianne, all the participants for your questions. Please have a look at our the slide in order to see how to get in touch with us. We would be happy if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel in order to see that podcast from Jonathan, who couldn't join us today, and also the answers that he would provide to your questions. We hope to see you on the 9th of December for our last online talk for this year. It's about artificial intelligence and where we stand regarding regulations. And we will have another event coming up. We will inform you via email. It will be, let's say, an ideal sourcing event for our Geneva impacts process. So we hope you help us find our next focus area we will be using and focusing on for our next round. I wish you a very nice evening. Have a good week and hope to see you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to meet you all. Please feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn as well if you've got any follow-up questions or anything like that as well.
Excellent. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.